Hello, everyone. Today is Tuesday, May 12th, 2026, and welcome back to my YouTube channel, The Political Report. Now, for today's topic, I wanted to cover the recent news of Virginia's state Supreme Court striking down the Democrats' gerrymander that passed in a ballot proposition, striking it down in a 4-3 decision, siding with the Republicans in the state that sued the ballot proposition based on illegal timing against the state's constitution. So you can see this article here by the New York Times, which mentions this was a huge blow for the Democrats. All of the Virginia Democrats essentially banked their entire career on this redistricting referendum going through and passing. So if you go here to the actual results from the ballot proposition, you can see here that Democrats actually ended up passing their 10-1 gerrymander by around 3.3 percentage points. Now, if you recall, in the 2025 gubernatorial election, Abigail Spanberger ended up winning by 14 percentage points, where the Democrat came out victorious from the governor's race. So the fact that this only passed by around 3.3 percentage points was approximately an 11-point underperformance for the Democrats. Now, once you actually go into the way the map looks, you can kind of see why some Democrats may not have wanted to vote for it, hence leading to the 11-point underperformance compared to the governor's race. You can see here in the new proposed districts that the Democrats had that was just overturned by the Supreme Court of Virginia, that they actually ended up splitting Fairfax County a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, potentially even 5 different ways. Now, the reason they wanted to split Fairfax County and Northern Virginia was because that is pretty much where the entire state's population of these heavily concentrated Democrats were. So they wanted to make sure they got the best bang for their buck by diluting all of those Democratic votes across 4 to 5 congressional districts, ensuring whatever Republicans existed in those counties south of Fairfax County, that those Republicans do not have enough votes to get a congressional district to win for them. Hence why you see districts over here where Fairfax is somehow connected almost all the way to Virginia Beach, connected all the way down to almost Charlottesville, Prince William County, and in the more northern rural counties in the state of Virginia, because Democrats wanted to gerrymander all of their Democratic votes to different portions of Virginia to ensure that Republicans could not win. In this map, Republicans only had one congressional district where it would be a 1-10 map where Republicans only have one and Democrats would get all 10 congressional districts that they gerrymandered. Now, if you go down here to the actual decision, you can see here that in a 4-3 opinion, the Virginia Supreme Court wrote that the Democratic legislators had violated their own state's constitution with their move to enact the map that was meant to give them 10 out of the 11 seats. Now, this was because a lot of special maneuvers that the Democrats did. So right before the election, a lot of the Democrats in the House of Delegates for the state of Virginia ended up calling a special session where they passed their gerrymandered map. And on top of that, they apparently illegally extended their special session beyond the term that the special session had actually been allowed for. And on top of that, after the election, they continued the special session into the new year to push forward for a second round of votes to pass the redistricting ballot initiative to the ballot for the April 2026 referendum. A lot of this occurred while early voting was already happening, and according to the state constitution, this needs to occur between 2 separate elections. So a lot of this, even at the beginning point, was seen as a legal gray area and was one of the many factors that the Virginia Supreme Court was considering here to rule whether or not the ballot initiative in the first place was illegal. And just based on the process alone, when comparing it to the Virginia state constitution, that was enough for the Virginia Supreme Court to rule that the Democratic legislators had violated the law, and therefore this ballot initiative will not go through. Which is a massive blow to the Democrats, because Democrats thought, that 3.1 million voters ended up voting for this ballot initiative, and they ended up winning by 3 percentage points. So a lot of Democrats find it unfair that a lot of these Republican states are able to gerrymander and redistrict because of the Supreme Court decision where they struck down Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, effectively getting rid of those black majority districts that were guaranteed previously to southern cities down in the southern states, preventing Republicans from gerrymandering their state. But with Section 2 gone, Republicans have went full steam ahead and have ended up gaining ground on the Democrats when it comes to the gerrymandering, with the Democrats' last hope essentially being Virginia and the map sticking. However, it looks like the somewhat moderate Virginia Supreme Court ended up deciding and ruling against the Democrats, where there was a 4-3 decision. Now, coincidentally, the way that Virginia Supreme Court justices are decided in the state of Virginia is actually elected by the state's House of Delegates, in which out of the 7 justices, a slight majority of 4 of them were actually elected during Republican-controlled General Assemblies, while 3 of them were enacted during Democrat-controlled General Assemblies. However, none of these were by massive landslides or massive votes in the General Assemblies, so a lot of the times these were compromise or somewhat moderate candidates that they ended up forwarding to the Virginia Supreme Court. The most interesting fact about this was the deciding vote here and the swing vote in the Virginia Supreme Court was actually a Supreme Court justice that was previously appointed by Mark Warner for another judicial seat in the state of Virginia. So this was a judge who was previously appointed by a literal Democrat that ended up siding against the Democrats here more than 20 years later. So the Democrats seem to have essentially banked their entire 2026 redistricting campaign on the swing votes of some of these moderate justices, and in this 4-3 decision, and ended up ruining and spoiling all of their plans. Now, not only did it ruin their plans for their congressional redistricting push for the whole year, this was even worse for the Democrats, as they spent over $70 million for campaign advertising for the ballot initiative in the first place, whereas Republicans underestimated their own voter turnout and didn't even invest money into the race in the first place, where Democrats ended up spending more than $70 million to win by 3 percentage points just to be shut down by the Supreme Court, leading to Democrats being down another $70 million in their already poor fundraising for the 2026 cycle, which has made things even worse for them. Now, the disaster seems to continue getting worse for the Virginia Democrats, where now, because of the fact that the congressional gerrymandering and redistricting ended up failing in the state of Virginia, a lot of these Democratic candidates who announced their bid and their run in the state of Virginia are actually now fighting and going to primary against the current incumbent Democrats in their own Democratic districts. So a lot of the Democrats here in the state ended up spending a lot of money recruiting these candidates in their new gerrymandered districts, but because the gerrymandered districts are now gone, those Democratic candidates are now switching back and filing against current incumbent Democrats. That's going to set up an even more costly and bitter primary battle against these Democrats. You can see here in this New York Times article, quote unquote, "No seat for me, Virginia Democrats are forced to play musical chairs," where a lot of these House candidates are either being pushed into a tougher race that they did not expect or switching their races to another safer Democrat race, which is going to create a sunk cost for a lot of these Democrats where they ended up investing millions of dollars into these candidates that is not going to actually gain them any more net Democratic seats in the state. Looking at the national level, this has actually caused a total state of desperation for all of the Democrats in the House, as this led to a nationwide call with a lot of members of the House from Virginia and the top House Democrats for the entire country, showing their desperation and their fury at the fact that they are now desperately losing this congressional gerrymandering war across the country during the 2026 cycle, where Democrats are struggling to find their final option of what they can do to fight back, considering this was the final setback that they had and they really have no options left. You can see here that the National House Democrats were in conversations with a lot of the Democrats in the state of Virginia, and they couldn't even find a specific course forward for how they can recover some of these seats that they are now guaranteed to lose in the 2026 House elections because the gerrymandering effort failed. They even proposed one of the most extreme judicial reform we have ever seen at any state judicial level. They were considering an unusual gambit to replace the entire state Supreme Court, where the justice system in the state of Virginia did not side with them, so instead, they were going to go scorched earth and essentially fire and get rid of every single judge in the Virginia Supreme Court by the Democratic majority passing new legislation, removing all of them. But as the article notes, that drew a lot of mixed reactions on a call, where a lot of Virginia Democrats did not think it would be, one, possible or viable, or two, they felt that would go way too far, with a lot of them thinking this would not even be something that the Democratic governor, Abigail Spanberger, or the Democrats in the Virginia General Assembly would even consider because of how extreme it is. Their plan was to create a mandatory retirement age for all of the Supreme Court justices, which in all honesty is a really, really risky gambit that they wanted to do, where they wanted to lower the retirement age all the way from 75 years old to 54 years old, which is such a random number that the only reason they chose it is because that is the youngest current justice in the Supreme Court of Virginia. So essentially they wanted to force all of the justices into instant retirement, so that the Democrats can push through 7 entirely new Democratic justices who would side with their own legislation that they want to pass. This is so extreme that this will be the lowest retirement age in the entire country for any of the judicial nominees or judicial appointments, forcing all of them to retire and quit their job at the age of 54. A lot of the Democrats, for obvious reasons, were against this because of how extreme it was and because it could also backfire. Imagine they are able to pass through 7 new partisan Democrats to the Supreme Court just for them to be forced to retire at the age of 54. That means if Republicans ever took over Virginia again, that the Republicans can push forward 7 entire Supreme Court justices just because the Democrats are about to retire at 54 years old. But this is something that just shows how desperate the Democrats are here, as they are really out of options, as Republicans are gerrymandering the entire southern half of the United States in all of their southern districts because of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act being destroyed, and Republicans being able to push through one or two more Republican-aligned gerrymanders in their own southern states, while Virginia was able to squeak through a 3% victory in their ballot proposition to try and gain 4 Democratic seats for themselves. However, the Supreme Court struck it down. But even here, the Democrats within the state of Virginia and nationally are realizing they are totally screwed, and their most extreme decision that they're considering in Virginia would be dead on arrival because even the Democrats won't even agree with it. And to put the final cherry on top of the problem the Democrats are dealing with in the state of Virginia, their own Virginia State Senate leader, Louise Lucas here, that was actually the main proponent behind this 10-to-1 gerrymander and represents the large establishment of the Democrats in the state Senate in Virginia, has actually been indicted by the FBI, who executed multiple search warrants on her residences in the state of Virginia, where the Trump administration is weaponizing a previous investigation into the Democratic Senator Louise Lucas that actually started during the former Democrat President Joe Biden's administration, where Joe Biden was looking into her for potential criminal actions regarding to her investments into cannabis businesses within the state of Virginia. So not only are Democrats dealing with their own issues in the state of Virginia when it comes to winning back the redistricting fight, but their Democratic state leader could be going to prison if this investigation finds any criminal misconduct. So with a lot of the Democrats nationwide being desperate and unable to come to a conclusion on the issue, and the only Democrat within the state Senate that was able to push a lot of this partisan gerrymandering, the 10-to-1 map through, being under FBI investigation where she might be forced to resign or imprisoned before any of these desperate plans take place, is really a firestorm that the Democrats in Virginia were not anticipating, as they basically use all of their political capital very early just for the Supreme Court to strike it all down, essentially handicapping the Democrats in Virginia, and something that they have spent hundreds of millions of dollars on just to fail at the court level. Now, this has created a disaster for the Democrats at a national level, where they thought they were going to be running even against the Republicans when it came to the redistricting and the gerrymandering game. But now that things are almost all said and done, Republicans are already up 6 to 8 Republican gerrymander seats for the election, with multiple other southern states coming up soon with their own redistricting and gerrymandering plans themselves. So the Democrats were at one point nearly even at the redistricting, just to fall up short at the very last minute because of this Virginia redistricting ruling. Now, the national implications of all the redistricting and the House elections is something I will be covering on a future video here on the channel once all the redistricting is said and done, as this is a very fluid process. I won't go any deeper for the sake of this video, but I want to know what you guys think about the Virginia redistricting, where things currently stand right now. So if you enjoyed the video, go ahead and leave a like down below and write a comment about what you think about the redistricting efforts here. Do you think that Democrats have any options left for 2026 when it comes to redistricting? Or in one of my previous videos, I mentioned the fact that Democrats seem to now be focused on the 2028 redistricting to make up for the setbacks and the failures they had here in this 2026 redistricting. With that being said, everyone, that's all I had for today's video, and I'll see you all later this week.